And we're live for live stream number 3, I believe it is. UFC 324 fight week, 325 fight week, I should say, actually. 324. We just came off of this past weekend. Fun card all around. Some surprises, some obvious spots as well. Obviously the main event we'll talk about very shortly here. I just want to get some more people in here before we really start digging into things. But I gotta say, I am very happy and content with really getting in the groove of stepping into this, live stream space once again. It's a lot of fun chopping it up with you guys, taking all your questions, talking about all the relevant news, breaking down fights, all that good stuff. The Fight Day live chat was amazing. So shout out to each and every one of you that stopped on by for that. That was a blast. We got my guy David Nettles in here nice and early. Happy to see you, my friend. But yeah, Fight Day live chat was amazing. The watch party was great. Shout out to the few guys that ended up signing up for that and joining and watching the fights with us. That was a whole lot of fun. But it was just fun to finally watch fights. It was, there were if you're a die-hard MMA fan, there was still MMA to consume between the two UFC events, right? But in terms of there's nothing like watching a UFC broadcast, right? They have everything pinpointed. They got everything perfectly set up. From the timing, obviously there was a little bit of delay with the advertisers, and they were going a little bit longer with a lot more of the filler stuff, but we know that was mainly due to the whole Paramount Plus thing. But they said, one of the producers actually commented on Twitter saying that there's going to be they will go back to the usual fight time schedule for main cards and all that, because the Paramount Plus thing was just kind of a one-off type of thing, doing all the ceremonial stuff that they ended up doing. But the camera angles, the replays, that's one thing I find with other promotions. They're not as good with picking up on some of the smaller things that might be going on in the cage, whereas the UFC, they have cameras pretty much everywhere. And if there's something that a cornerman says, or if there's a small possible injury that may have happened, they have all the angles that you need to cut to, and they do a great job in terms of cutting to it right away. I find with the UFC, they do a great job in terms of providing replays at the perfect times, especially when the fight ends, right? I find with these other promotions, they take forever to finally show us the replay. They just show the fighters walking around the cage, the one guy dejected, the one guy celebrating, but they stay on it for too long, or they swipe to a commercial or something like that. Whereas the UFC, they'll give you the replay within, I'd be surprised if it's more than a minute that goes by after the fight actually finishes where they give us the replay. So I very much missed those aspects of watching the UFC broadcast, and we're able to get that back this past weekend at UFC 324. So I'm very happy about that. Shout out to my guy, Robert Saladino, in the chat as well, nice and early here. I'll get into the questions. I'll let them mount up a little bit before I really start digging into things. Obviously, we'll talk UFC 324. We'll talk UFC 325. I'll take all questions and comments regarding those things, and any other questions that you guys obviously have. I'd be more than happy to touch on that stuff. Another thing that's in my in the title for this stream is that it seems like Joshua Van may have announced his next fight and who his next opponent might be, and it's looking like it might be Manel Kape. I don't know if I saw something that Ali Abdelaziz tweeted out saying, he listed one of his fighters from every single division were going to be champ by the ending of 2026. And for the flyweight division, he said Manel Kape. So I don't know if Van was replying to that, because he replied, or didn't reply. He just tweeted March 7th ? Told Tyra to be ready in case Titty Boy ends up pulling out again. And obviously he's referring to Manel Kape and the whole gyno issue that he had, a couple fights back. So it would be interesting to see Van against Kape as the first title defense for Van. I think that's a little bit better than Tyra fighting for the title, but Tyra should definitely either get the following title shot or whenever Pantoja gets back, gets his crack again at Van, maybe Tyra gets a shot at the ending of the year. So if Van wants to stay busy or the champion wants to stay busy, we could definitely see the flyweight title be defended at least 3 times this year, but it's looking like it's going to be Manel Kape against Joshua Van in March, if that's the timeline that ends up adding up here. So that is the next pay-per-view, I believe. I don't think there's a pay-per-view in February. I'm just going to double check that because I know they're doing an Apex show on the 7th. Then they're off on the 14th. Then they're going to Houston on the 21st of February. And then they're doing Mexico on the 28th of February. And then the first event of March is going to be UFC 326, which is already headlined by the BMF title fight between Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira. So I don't know if the UFC is going to want to turn around that quickly and just, throw a next title fight in there. From all I know, Kyle Bahayo and Renier de Ridder is supposed to be the co-main event of that pay-per-view. But if they end up throwing that flyweight title fight on there, that would be a banger as well. All right, let's get into the comments and questions here. Seems like you guys are already touching on the ad stuff and commercials since I've already put that, or I originally had that in the title of the stream before that Joshua Van news came together. All right, let's see here. Shout out to David Neto. Shout out to my guy Robert Saladino. Neto's saying, what do you think about Poirier talking about coming back for one more fight? I don't know if that's, I didn't see exactly what he said, but from maybe the headline or from what I'd seen, it said he was kind of itching to come back, but I think it was more so him just expressing that he would, he'd be open to returning. I just don't think he would actually do it. To me, he seems like a guy that's actually going to sit on the sidelines. I feel like he made a good chunk of money with the UFC. So, he had his hot sauce brand out there. I'm sure he has a lot of other business ventures that he's sticking to as well. So I'd kind of be surprised if he decides to come back. If he decides to come back, what fights are there really for him that people are clamoring to see? Right, he's already fought the Gaethjes, he's fought the Chandlers, he's fought Oliveira. We don't care to see the Max Holloway fight again. That was obviously his supposed retirement fight. Maybe a McGregor fight, right? McGregor beat him once. Poirier technically beat him twice, even though one of those was the injury. But outside of that, I don't think there is much use to bring Poirier back, nor should he. He seems like one of those guys that should stick to the retirement and just, I'm done, right? He should just call it and just stay on the sidelines. So, fingers crossed that he doesn't come back. I love him as a fighter. He's an entertaining fighter. Heck, if he wants to run it back with Dan Hooker, that would be a cool, interesting matchup. That would be the one that intrigues me the most. But I don't think there's reason for him to come back. Nor do I think many fans are clamoring for him to come back. That's one of those, he put a storybook end to his career, even though he lost. It is what it is. He got to perform in his home state, hometown kind of thing, and got that sent off with a pretty good fight against Max Holloway. Robert Saladino saying Paddy is not that guy. I warned everyone. There was a reason he never fought anyone at the top level in their prime. Yeah, like I am guilty in terms of picking him to win. Did I say that his chalk was worth it? Probably not. I think that this is one of those spots where you had to consider the odds, and I thought they were just a little bit too wide. I may have written off Gaethje a little bit. I know he was coming off that win over Fiziev, but I think Fiziev was slightly compromised in that matchup, coming back after a year and a half long layoff after that injury he suffered against Mateusz Gamrot. On short notice as well. That's another aspect that people kind of overlooked. And I kind of just said, hey, Gaethje's a good boxer, but I feel like he wouldn't have been able to eat a clean enough shot from Paddy, but proved me wrong there. He ate a huge shot, plenty of big shots, especially in that, third round, where it seemed like momentum was kind of swinging towards Paddy Pimblett. It seemed like Gaethje was kind of demoralized in that round and gave that round away, but then Gaethje comes back in round 4, maybe gave away round 5, but it was obvious that at least rounds 1, 2, and 4 went to Gaethje. But yeah, Paddy, I'm so upset at myself. This happens to me time and time again where I fade a fighter on the come up, but they get favorable matchups, right? There's the Jared Gordon fight where I really thought Gordon should have won. The King Green fight, I thought Green would be able to outstrike him, but for some reason he shoots a takedown, puts himself into a submission. The Michael Chandler fight may have skewed my thoughts on Paddy a little bit, especially the way he just dominated him, and I think that kind of just loomed heavy in my head. But I think a lot of it had to do with me writing Gaethje off as well. I did not think he was, 37 years old. He's had his issues with durability at times, but he showed the fuck up. He really took momentum from that fight from jump, and he did allow Paddy to fight back into it a little bit in round 3, but outside of that, Gaethje did a pretty damn good job of asserting his dominance and having good success there. So, Paddy's not that guy. I would love to see. I doubt he fights Arman Tsarukyan. There's no way he's going to take that fight next. He's going to wait for another, aging veteran in a sense. Trying to think of off the top of my head who he could fight next. You know what? Let's open up the rankings. Why don't we match up Paddy Pimblett next? Let's pull up the rankings here. Lightweight rankings. So you got Paddy at number 5, lost to Gaethje, who's obviously the interim champ now. Tsarukyan, he probably won't fight him. Maybe the loser of Oliveira and Holloway, but I doubt the UFC would do that. Maybe he fights the winner of Benoit Saint-Denis and Dan Hooker. That would be a pretty good matchup, right? Both those guys, even with the win this weekend, still need another win or so to try to position themselves closer to a title shot. And I think a fight against Paddy Pimblett would be pretty cool. Mateusz Gamrot against Pimblett would be interesting in terms of the grappling dynamic in that matchup. But yeah, I think there's enough good matchups here. You got Fiziev and Houfi fighting each other, or Rufi, however you want to say it. But I really think maybe the winner of Saint-Denis and Hooker could fight Paddy Pimblett next. That wouldn't be a bad angle to take for him next. All right. David Norris saying, I think that the canceling of several fights probably caused the commercials to be played more than they normally would have been. Maybe I'm wrong. So whenever there are fights canceled pre-fight or before the fights go on air, the UFC does rejig the start time a little bit. So they did rejig it for when the Smotherman fight fell through. They pushed the start time back a half hour, but then after the Hernandez fight was scrapped, they didn't push it back. But what they did is they started the broadcast at 5:30 or whatever it was, and then just did a half hour filler, and they even had a ticker at the bottom of the screen that said 30 minutes or 25 minutes until the first fight. So their scheduling is one fight every half hour. For main cards, they're able to really, they're able to speed it up a little bit more. But for prelims and early prelims, they have to stick to like a half hour per fight, even if a fight finishes early, because of TV schedules from all over the world. They have to stick to those TV times. But yeah, that's kind of the whole thing in terms about commercials and all that. It seemed like they were stuffing in a lot of commercials, though, where we're usually not used to seeing them either. And I think that's what a lot of people had problems with while they were watching that event. Robert saying, I clicked on Alex versus Ang 2 and had to watch 2 commercials. Not normal. Huh. Oh, yeah, for Paramount Plus, you're watching it afterwards. Yeah. Very weird. David Naro saying, I think Kopp wins that fight if he fights Van. Do you think Pantoja's injury puts an asterisk on Van's championship reign if he loses in his first defense of the title? Well, the real fans will know what the situation was with that whole flyweight situation, right? Like with Pantoja losing the title in mere seconds due to an injury, you can't help but feel for Van, right? That was a big opportunity for him to try to take that title, and that's how he ends up getting it. It kind of reminds me of the Sterling and Yan thing, even though we got to see that fight play out a little bit more, and maybe Sterling wasn't as deserving of actually winning that fight in the first place. Whereas this fight, we didn't really get to see it play out at all. So yeah, there is going to be an asterisk on Van's championship reign per se, but the record books will still show the fact that he won the title, and that's what I think ends up mattering at the end of the day. I think Cap wins the fight too. I think Cap is a superior striker to Van. Van, technically speaking, is not a bad striker. Good forward pressure, mixes it up in the pocket very well. Great work with the body work and all that. But I don't think he can keep up with the athleticism, speed, and power of Cap. And, you get knocked out by Charles Johnson, who's not much of a knockout specialist. You're obviously going to get hit pretty hard by Cap and probably put away there. So, hats off to Van if he accepts Cap as the first challenger. If I was him, I would rather have Tatsuro Taira be the first challenger so you can maybe have a chance at getting a first title defense. But I think the Cap fight is a very bad stylistic matchup for Van. David Nettles saying, Gaethje Topuria, who are you taking? I like Topuria by KO in under 3 rounds. Yeah, I agree. I don't think Gaethje can, his durability showed up against Paddy, but we know Paddy doesn't hit like Topuria. And I think that's where the difference maker is going to be. Also, don't count out the ability for Topuria to out-wrestle Gaethje and utilize his BJJ. He's been known as this knockout puncher, but he is a very good BJJ specialist. Just as we saw when I believe he submitted Bryce Mitchell. He has submissions on his record, and that's what he leaned on before coming to the UFC. If you run the Topuria tape pre-UFC, this guy was mainly a grappler. But once he came to the UFC, that's where he started to lean more on his striking and his knockout power, and it started to translate for him. So, yeah, I think Topuria is already listed as a pretty big favorite, if I'm not mistaken. I think the odds for that fight are already out. Let me see if I can pull that up somewhere. Topuria Gaethje odds. I'm pretty sure, yeah, minus 600 for Topuria, plus 400 for Justin Gaethje. So it's going to be quite chalky on the Topuria side of things. Robert's saying, I don't mind Conor versus Justin, Hoofi versus Paddy, Ilya versus Arman. Conor versus Justin wouldn't be bad, but and I think Justin would rather take that fight than fight Arman or Ilya. But who knows? They already have the whole interim title thing going on, so I think they're going to try to line Ilya and Justin up first. Hoofi and Paddy, well, Hoofi's got to get past Fiziev first, which I really don't think he does. And then Ilya versus Arman. Ilya versus Arman, in my opinion, would be the highest level fight you could possibly put together, other than maybe Ilya and Makhachev. I'd love to see Makhachev come back down to lightweight, but I think those days are kind of gone. But yeah, Ilya versus Makhachev would be the highest level fight, although the size advantage of Makhachev gives me a little bit of pause for Ilya, whereas size-wise, Ilya and Arman are much closer in size. Arman even came on Ariel's show earlier today, if I'm not mistaken. It was either today or yesterday, and he said that he would be willing to go down to 145 pounds to challenge for that title. He said he's, ran the tests and all that stuff. He can make 145 pounds if he needs to, and I wouldn't mind seeing that. If he can make the weight, and if they're going to continue to lollygag at 155 pounds, because now we got to wait for Justin versus Ilya, and he's not guaranteed a title shot after that. Who knows? Yeah, I'd love to see Ilya versus Arman sooner or later. Let's be serial. Appreciate you stopping by, my friend. If Lopez wins, will the division be on hold still for a Volk versus Lopez 3? It's possible. It really depends on how much the UFC still respects Volkanovski. They gave him an immediate rematch. No, they didn't give an immediate rematch against Ilya Topuria. So, well, they did end up giving him, a title fight in his following matchup. So not an immediate rematch, but at least he got to fight for the title after he lost the title. The question is, are they going to give him another one here if he loses to Lopez? That is a good question. Because then you got Movzar on the sideline. You got Lerone Murphy on the sideline. So there is some, hold up there. If they end up doing Volk versus Lopez 3, I wouldn't mind Evloev and Murphy fighting each other, maybe as a co-main event 5-round. So they have kind of a backup fighter if they need it, but also to determine who the next number one contender should be. But I wouldn't be against them doing Volkanovski versus Lopez 3 if Diego wins. Volk has done a lot for the company. He's stayed very active when he was champion. Maybe he came back a little bit too quickly against Ilya when he shouldn't have. So those types of things, it really depends on how much the UFC is still leaning on that and how quickly Volk could get back into the cage, depending on if he gets knocked out cold this weekend or if this goes to a close decision or something like that. It really depends on that. But I wouldn't mind seeing a third fight if he ends up losing, depending on how he loses. Robert saying Diego has a better chance at a KO in the rematch, I believe. It's possible. I spoke about this in the lead up to the Ankalaev and Pereira fight. I picked Ankalaev in the first fight. We had good odds on him there. And then he came in as a minus 250 favorite in the second fight. And I stayed off it. But rather, I shot on the under in that fight because I think it was up at 2.5 or 3.5 or something like that. And I felt we were going to see a more aggressive version of Pereira. And look what we got. Within 2 minutes or whatever it was, 2 or 3 minutes, we saw Pereira just walk through Ankalaev. It's possible we could see Lopez take that approach now. Maybe he ate the best shots that he could from Volkanovski, and now he's just like, you know what? I can handle this guy's best shot. I'm going to put it on him. I dropped him in the second round of our first matchup. If I just keep that aggression up, maybe I can get him out of there sooner than later. So I think we could see a more aggressive version of Lopez. Is that enough to make me still want to go and change my pick to Lopez? No. I think Volk is very intelligent, has great fight IQ, is a guy that's going to, be prepared for that type of approach, I'm sure, and will still do a good enough job in terms of trying to stay safe. I don't want to be surprised to see Volk look to wrestle more here. If Lopez is going to put his foot on the gas, that means takedowns might come a little bit easier. So, I think you are right, Robert, that Diego has a better chance at a KO this time around because I think of the experience that he got from the first round and seeing that his sliver of success was him hurting Volkanovski. So why not try to expand that opportunity and expand the chances of hurting him again and trying to get him out of there? So in that aspect, I think you are correct. Patricia Lian Shaw. Shout out to Patricia. Arman should move to welterweight and beat Islam. I think the UFC would want him to at least get the title at 55 first before he moves over to Islam. But I would love to see the Islam rematch, right? Seeing what happened in their first fight when it was Arman Sarukian's first UFC matchup, first UFC fight, and now to see them after years and years of experience and all that, I think that's a very high-level fight. So I hope that we get to see that sooner than later. I'm not holding out hope, though. I think Makhachev will probably end up hanging up the gloves within the next 2 years or so, and there's got to be a lot that happens if Arman eventually wants to fight Islam again, especially having to move up to welterweight. Patricia also saying Gaethje has been an underdog 12 times. He's absolutely killed it. He's been doing very well, coming through in spots that not a lot of people would expect him to. Not bad. Robert saying Arman has gained so much popularity waiting for his fights. How long will the UFC punish him? And I kind of touched on this in the last live stream that we did. Or one of the last live streams that we did. Arman has done a phenomenal job in terms of making himself undeniable by, one, winning all the fights that the UFC is putting ahead of him, and now he's starting to finish fights too. Two, become undeniable as a draw. Linking up with all of the content creators, going on podcasts, going on live streams with what's his name, Aiden Ross. He's done a phenomenal job in terms of pushing himself and trying to become popular so that the UFC has no choice but to give him the shot, right? He did fumble the bag with the pulling out in the Makhachev fight on weigh-in day. He did kind of mess up by headbutting Dan Hooker at the weigh-ins before his last matchup. So as long as he can reel it in, obviously punching that fan on the way out to fight one of his fights as well. But if he can reel it in, continue to work on this popularity, his Instagram following is fucking going through the roof. He's absolutely killing it as of late. Now it just comes down to timing. He should be the one technically fighting for the title next, but we got an interim champion in Justin Gaethje, and then they got Ilia Topuria with the undisputed title. So that business needs to be taken care of first before Arman can get a shot. David asking, what do you think the ceiling is for Josh Hockett? His cardio looked questionable. Do you think that he is a possible top 10 or 15 fighter? I think he's a top 5 fighter, honestly. His cardio looked questionable because I think he saw the ability to run through Freeman. Like, it seemed like his game plan was to just not let Freeman have any success. Stay in his face, push the pace, and know that the eventual finish will come. And once you heard him the first time, he did not let off the gas, and that allowed him to eventually get the finish there. So, yeah, I like Hockett. I thought there was some value on Freeman. I questioned his fighter mentality. He's a good martial artist, but he's clearly not a fighter, and Hockett brought it out of him there. So I think Hockett, based on the heavyweight division we have currently, is a guy that could easily make it into the top 5, top 7 of the division. I'm not a huge fan of his weird antics and post-fight interviews. They are hilarious at times, but if he can reel that in a little bit more and just find the right groove in terms of cringe and all that, I think he'll be fine. But talent-wise, skill-wise, fighting-wise, I think he's definitely one of the better guys in the division. Patricia saying, where was Gaethje's 60 to 70 leg kicks? Yeah, that's another thing that, it seemed like that was Paddy's game plan in the fight. It seemed like Paddy was the one that was trying to slow Gaethje down with that consistent leg kick, and he was doing some pretty good damage. But yeah, Gaethje has kind of really reeled off from it. It's kind of like Jose Aldo, right? When Aldo was in his prime, he was leg kicking dudes left, right, and center. We all have seen the pictures of Uriah Faber's legs after Aldo torched him in the WEC. That's what Gaethje used to do to fools. And now he's just laid off it. His boxing has looked great. This seemed like a good enough stylistic matchup for him to get off on the leg kicks, but maybe he was scared of potentially giving up a leg for a single leg or giving up an easier entry into a takedown from Paddy Pimblett. So maybe that's why he stayed off it. Maybe it comes down to the stylistic clash there. But yeah, I would love to see Gaethje get back to the leg kicks, because that sucker, man, he just absolutely brutalizes fools' legs. I love it. Infected 38, hi, I'm new here. Appreciate you stopping by. Hope you're enjoying the stream. Make sure to drop any and all questions that you have, either for the fights that are coming up, the fights that just finished, or any other relevant news. Dan the Man saying, did anyone hear heavy breathing during the broadcast, or was it just me? Yeah, I heard that too. And it's happened a few times during the UFC broadcasts. I don't know what it is. I feel like people have commented on it before. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's somebody that has a hot mic that doesn't know that they have a hot mic, or just forgot to turn it off. But it's happened before. Definitely heard it the last time as well. Shinobi, respect. Big shout out to you, Sing Saab G. Great picks, my guy. Appreciate the love, my friend. Appreciate the love. I'm glad to see some other Punjabis out there. Robert Saladino saying it was DC. They should mute his mic when he's not talking. Was it DC? Have we confirmed that? Because again, I know we've heard it before. I just don't know if it was DC on the mic that time as well. Robert saying Crow Cop stopped kicking as much later on too. Guessing it's a speed and hip issue. Maybe it's that. Crow Cop did also, remember when he broke his leg or knee or whatever it was when he got knocked out by Gabriel Gonzaga? That was a nasty one. That one almost escaped my mind until you just brought it up right now. I totally forgot that Crow Cop fucked up his leg bad. If you're a newer fan, YouTube, Miracle Crow Cop against Gabriel Gonzaga. I think that was UFC 70-something, way back in the day. And Crow Cop was that guy. He was that guy coming over from Pride, head kicking dudes left, right, and center. And then he got head kicked to oblivion against Crow Cop. I'm sure Gonzaga was a big underdog going into that fight as well. And for him to turn the tables the way that he did and land that nasty head kick and put Crow Cop out cold and have Crow Cop mangle his knee and leg the way that he did, god damn. Robert, you're sending me down memory lane by bringing up Crow Cop, brother. I appreciate that. Patricia saying Pimples ain't beating nobody in the top 5. It's possible, man. I really, fuck. I'm really kicking myself for not taking the value on Gaethje. You know what I mean? I was always looking for opportunities to fade. I'm always looking for an opportunity to fade Paddy. And I did up until I think the Green fight. But then after the Chandler fight, I didn't fade him in the Chandler fight. But seeing how badly he beat Chandler down, I kind of got some love for him and gave him a little bit more credit than I should have. Thankfully, I didn't wager on the Pimblett side of things there. David asking your take on the Silva decision over Rose. I'm seeing a lot of people scream robbery. If you guys follow me, you know that I took Rose. Plus 340 was too hard to pass up in a fight like that matchup, right? All the experience on Rose's side, her ability to mix in the grappling when she needed to, being a good enough striker when she needed to. I thought her cardio could have held up a little bit better, but, a lot of people thought rounds 1 and 2 probably should have gone to Rose. But that first round was so close. You can't yell robbery there. It was a very, very close round. I'm trying to remember the other one that was close. I think it was the O'Malley and Song fight where round 1 was very close. So, yeah. It's an unfortunate one when you have to rip up a plus 340 ticket in a very, very close fight. But yeah. Let's be serious saying, can the Hangman survive the God of War for 50 minutes? It's possible. I want to give the Hangman some credit, seeing how he was able to, stay alive against Gamrot, stay out of bad positions. The difference between Gamrot and Benoit Saint-Denis is more known to be a finisher. He will take the back and he'll look for that rear naked choke, and it's possible he can catch the Hangman in it. But if he can't, we saw Maurizio Hufi get into the second round, halfway through the second round, but by then he was just so broken. Benoit's not going to break Hooker, unless he finishes him in that first round and a half, and then Hooker started getting back to his feet in the second round. I think it's going to be harder for Saint-Denis to get him to the ground, and I think he's going to be at the whim of Hangman's striking game. So it's a much closer fight than the odds indicate, in my opinion. I think the fight will not hit the scorecards, and I like the Hooker later round props here, round 2 and round 3 KO. He's also a sneaky submission specialist as well. So if he can wear, Saint-Denis down, if he can defend early enough and continuously work back to his feet, it could be a much tougher fight for Saint-Denis. I'm picking Saint-Denis to win, just as I picked Silva to beat Rose. But in terms of, the betting aspect of it and the odds here, you have to consider the Hooker side and how live he can be, even if you take a sprinkle on his round 2 and round 3 props. Robert Singh, are you a gambler first, fan second, or fan first, gambler second? Doing content creation, let's say this. From the moment I start researching a card to the moment that the fights start, I got to go gambler first, right? I got to go, especially when you're doing content creation, when you're trying to provide that type of content to people, I can't let my favoritism or my bias towards a certain fighter come in the way of me giving you guys unbiased information, unbiased takes, predictions, all that stuff. So I have to be that content creator analyst first. Then I can be the fan second. So yeah, my fan cap comes on as soon as the fight starts, because at that point my job is done. After I'm done the fight day live chat, my job is done as a content creator. Maybe unless I go on the watch party, but even during these watch party live streams, I'm a fan. That's all it is. And that's what got me into the sport to begin with, right? I was a big fan. Eventually got an opportunity to work with the UFC way back in the day, made my connections, worked on a lot of regional shows up in the Toronto area. And then when, it was slim pickings in terms of full-time opportunities, I created my own lane and have been doing the content creation thing for the last, 8 years or so it's been now. I'd say I'd probably started taking it more seriously in the last 5 years. But, yeah, always been a fan, and that love for the sport has not died. I love it so much so to work through everything that I got through just so I can still stay in this lane and this this industry. So yeah. Let's be serious saying gotta be a fan of this sport to gamble. LOL. Too volatile to know your fighter, too volatile to not know your fighters. Yeah. That's another way to look at it, right? I want to say I'm more of a student of the sport, like in terms of, seeing strengths, weaknesses, picking up on which fighters are good in certain martial arts and all that stuff. I'd say I'm a student and then a fan of the sport. But yeah, to just blindly throw money on X fighter just because, I'm seeing a lot of people like, oh, Aaron Tao looks really good this weekend because he has a freaking face tattoo. But when you study the fights and see what he brings to the table compared to his opponent, Namzrai Batbayar, you see that, okay, It's not just about face tattoos, right? Or even physiques, right? Yoel Romero would be the champion of the world if it all came down to physiques. So yeah, you definitely got to know fighters. You got to know their styles, which styles work well against certain styles. If a fighter is a good enough fighter with that specific style, if it's good enough to beat the other fighter with that style. So a lot of things go into it. David Norris saying, do you believe that Derek Lewis just gave up and needs to retire? Excuse me. I think that's always been Lewis's style. You know, he either gets that quick knockout. Sometimes he's able to survive enough. Like, I feel like, you know, obviously grappling is a horrible stylistic matchup for Derek Lewis, but there's been so many fights where he's been out grappled for like 2-3 rounds, and then he's able to muster up a knockout in the fourth round because his opponent struggles to hold him down, or at least hold him down efficiently enough to stay away from the power once he brings it back on the feet. But when he fights more talented strikers, Cyril Gane, Alexander Volkov leading up to that knockout with 13 seconds left, and then Waldo Cortez Acosta, that's where he doesn't really have any space to rest. He's constantly taking damage. He's eating leg kicks. He's eating jabs. Sure, he's a little bit more live to pull off the upset when he's standing and can let go with his power, but the damage starts to mount up more when he's fighting other strikers compared to guys that are just going to lay on top of him and allow him to catch his breath so that he can go off and shoot another, you know, throw more haymakers and stuff like he did against Rodrigo Nascimento or, you know, Shamil Abdurakhimov, who he main evented against in Albany, New York years and years ago. So that's just Lewis's style. He either gets a quick knockout, he gets finished. I don't think he needs to retire. I think the UFC can still find fun matchups for him. Like, you know, he was just on a 3-fight winning streak, knocking out Talison Teixeira, who's supposed to be the next big heavyweight prospect. So he's still capable to go out there and notch these knockouts. He's a fan favorite as well. People love watching him fight. People love watching him talk on the mic if he gets to win. So I don't think he needs to retire. I think the UFC kind of leans on him, especially whenever they need a fight night main event, right? They've put him in that fight night main event spot so many times because they know he brings some eyeballs just because of who he is. So yeah, I don't think he needs to retire. I think he did give up. You know, there are fights where he just gives up because he's just eating too much damage. But he'll give himself a chance always. He'll always try to throw that haymaker. If it lands, it lands. If it doesn't, it is what it is. But good question there, David. Robert's saying Crow Cop getting Crow Copped by Gonzaga is my most shocking MMA moment. Yeah, that was wild. That was like just before I became a hardcore fan of MMA. So I just missed, you know, why it was such a big deal at the time. I'm trying to think of the biggest, crazy, most shocking MMA moment off the top of my head. I don't think anything's ever going to top the Holloway and Gaethje finish. Like, it wasn't so much that Holloway won, but the fashion in which he finished. Like, I remember saying, oh my God, for at least 10 minutes after that fight finished, right? That was one of the craziest sequences I think we've ever seen. A shocking moment off the top of my head, and I just put the posters up in this new studio now. I'd show you guys around a little bit, but I don't want to mess around with my camera here. But Aldo versus McGregor. Went to that card. UFC 194 back in December. I think 2015 was the year that it was. I could be off on that. I want to say 2015. Maybe 2016. I forgot what year it was. But seeing Aldo flatline... McGregor flatline Aldo in 13 seconds. Live. Right? That was shocking as hell. That was absolutely crazy. Those are the two most like shocking moments that come to mind off the top of my head. Robert saying, is it possible for the UFC to just pull the betting lines from gambling sites and let the fighters fight? Seems a better way than to punish fighters for having crap people in their camps. I remember they actually, it was the betting sites that pulled the UFC odds after the whole James Krause debacle. Remember, there was like at least up here in Canada, like the mainstream sites, FanDuel, DraftKings, and all that, they got rid of betting odds for the UFC. It was for like maybe 2 or 3 weeks or something like that, and then they eventually brought it back. But I think gambling is just always going to be there. I don't think the UFC has to do as much with being able to tell these sites to take it down. And I don't think they want to, right? When you got Dana White, who's a degenerate gambler, I don't think he's going to want to take that away. And especially with how much they push gambling on the broadcast, right? All the freaking, like this past weekend's card, I swear they had so many betting markets as their sponsors. I saw DraftKings, I saw FanDuel, I saw Bet365, I saw Polymarket, which is, what do they call it? A predictive market site? Not even a betting site. It's like a predictive market site. So like they're never going to get let go of that stuff. It's always going to be there. And what I mean by that, it's always going to be there in terms of some people are just going to be shitty in camp, and this is going to come out more often than not. And at least the UFC is doing the best job they can in terms of just pulling a fight rather than letting it go. And hopefully, the fighters that were involved, they're able to recognize the people that may have leaked this information, and they just cut ties with them from there. Robertson, Conor breaking his leg is another one. Yeah, that was a shocking moment. That was pretty shitty. As Anderson Silva breaking his leg. Oh, Chris Weidman knocking out Anderson Silva. That was another shocking moment, right? If Weidman was going to win that fight, it was probably going to look like the Chael Sonnen fight, but he just gets to the end and not get submitted, right? He's going to out-wrestle Silva. He's going to keep him on the ground. But to just go out there and knock Anderson Silva out as Anderson's mocking him as well, that was probably one of the most shocking moments I can remember off the top of my head as well. But yeah, Conor breaking his leg was pretty bad too. David saying your impression of Ty Miller from what you have seen thus far. The kid's good. The kid is talented. He's a very good striker. I think I leaned on Fugitt's durability a little bit more than I should have. I didn't give Miller the credit in terms of the power that he had. But even if it's not just the power, it's the death by 1,000 cuts approach that he takes. His length, his reach, his technical abilities. He's very clean. I believe he came from a boxing background before he went full swing into MMA, and it's showing off. I saw it on the LFA. He looked very good there. He's improving his defensive grappling, which is a good sign for him. And the fact that he's only 26 or 25 years old, absolutely crazy. This kid could really become something special if he stays on his path. And he has a pretty good team behind him too. Fit NHB, Fit No Holds Barred down there in Albuquerque, New Mexico, known for guys like Tim Means as well. I think Ty Miller could become something really good if he continues on this trajectory, continues to fill out that frame and that body of his, and continues to work on that takedown defense, which again still looks pretty damn good thus far. Let's be sure saying is Salkild worth his big minus 1,100 favorite. I think he wins, but Malarkey is a vet. I'm in the same thinking as you. Let's be serial. Absolutely same thinking as you there. It's tough. We see this all the time. Guys just getting big knockouts. Other guys looking mediocre, and then we see them as massive favorites. Especially with Malarkey's last two losses coming by knockout, I can see why people think that Salkild will probably just torch him right off the bat. The spot that I highlighted on the Lock-Cast yesterday, the full card breakdown, was the over 1.5, which is sitting at around plus 130. I think Salkild wins, but I think Malarkey makes it a little bit grindy. I think he makes it a little bit dirty. I think he starts looking for takedowns, and I think there are positions where he could, hold Salkild in position, whether it's from that top position, pushing him up against the cage, shooting for takedowns. Malarkey, I think, could be the stronger fighter between him and Salkild. Salkild's the more skilled fighter, obviously nasty Muay Thai, BJJ black belt. Malarkey's a BJJ brown belt, but it's clear that he's been working on that during that time that he had off before the Bedoya fight. We saw him utilize it in the Bedoya fight as well, controlling Bedoya for the entirety of that first round. So, yeah, mine is, I don't know if I definitely won't consider the plus money on Malarkey, but I will consider the plus money on the over 1.5, which is in a way, betting into this narrative that we're talking about here, that Malarkey's going to make it harder for Salkild than the lines are indicating here. David saying, we always hear about fighters coming from large gyms and doing well. Do you recall ever seeing anyone coming from a smaller gym and reaching title contention? There's definitely been a few. I know O'Malley was kind of linked to the MMA lab, so I guess he doesn't really count. I feel like there's been a few. I'm trying to think just off the top of my head. Joshua Van's not technically from a really big gym. Yeah, Robert Saladino saying here, Yuri doesn't come from a big gym either. The other thing is the European gyms, like I noticed this when I researched Octagon or KSW, there's a lot of big gyms over there too, right? But I'm not as privy to them because I don't know as many of the fighters over there. The main gyms that we hear about in Europe is the ones from England, right? You got Great Britain top team headed by Brad Pickett. You got Manchester top team headed by Carl Prince. Has guys like Lerone Murphy in there. I think there used to be London Shoot Fighters as well, which I don't know if they're still around as much, but I know that's where Michael Venom Page trains. Tom Breeze trained there. Team Renegade, right? Lerone Murphy comes from there. But like smaller gyms, Joshua Van is the one that comes to mind here. But yeah, most fighters, once they get like 2 or 3 fights in the UFC, they end up jetting to a different gym, or they jet to Vegas so that they can either train at Extreme Couture, but also bank the benefits that the UFC provides them with the UFC PI, right? You get free training there, free physio, I believe, free meals, so they don't even have to buy their food. I don't know what the circumstances and stipulations around that are. Like, I don't know if they have to be signed for a fight or something like that. But from what I know, if they live in Vegas, they can just go to the PI whenever they want and take full advantage of their services. So I know O'Day Osborne was one that for some reason comes to mind. He was a guy that used to train at Pure Vita BJJ in Milwaukee, or in the Wisconsin area, I believe it was. And then moved to Vegas after a couple UFC fights. And he's been at Syndicate as well as the UFC PI for the most part. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of guys that just stick with the smaller gyms that end up making it into title contention. But there are exceptions. There are definitely exceptions. All right, we got about 10 minutes left in the stream here. Keep the questions and comments coming, folks. Appreciate the love that we've built here. I appreciate the guys that are coming in. Robert, David, Let's Be Serial. Patricia even stepping in earlier as well. I don't care if it ends up just sticking to these amount of guys the entire time. The fact that you guys continue to bring questions, comments, and all that stuff, it makes me happy, and really, makes this thing worth it, and makes time fly by a lot faster rather than just talking to the screen by myself. Late last year, I decided to do like those members only YouTube streams, and I did maybe 4 or 5 of them, and 3 or 4 of them were just me talking to myself. I gave each stream 15 minutes, and I'm like, fuck it. And obviously there was a lot of hesitancy with me going on to the public live streams. But now, 2026, we're going to that next level, guys. We're going to reach 10,000 subscribers. That's my goal for the ending of the year, which I'd be surprised if we don't hit. On average, I've been getting about 12 to 1,500 new subscribers every year on the YouTube channel. And we're about 600 and something subscribers away from 10,000. And if I don't hit it this year, that would be a huge fail on my end. And not to mention the upgrades I've done in terms of the quality, the studio setup, the new look YouTube videos as well. I know that's been getting a lot of love. But most importantly, I think these live streams are going to be very important with building more of a following, connecting with you guys again. Even set up the Discord again and the Patreon as well, which, has been nice to really get back into as well. So, yeah, I'm beyond thankful that I've been able to get back into the live streaming side of things here, to have the confidence to do it again. That's what 2026 is bringing to me. It's a big year for me. It's a massive year for me that I look forward to breaking through barriers and getting to the next level. Let's see what, let's go to MMA Fighting. MMA Fighting used to be my main site that I would go to get all my news. Let's see what kind of relevant news we can find on MMA Fighting that we could talk about to end off the stream here. Pimblett releases first statement since interim title fight loss to Justin Gaethje. Let's see what he said. Hope everyone enjoyed my fight just as much as I did. Want to thank everyone that came to support and everyone watching at home. I'm all good. No injuries. Went into the fight feeling amazing. Had a great camp and an easy weight cut. No excuses. The better man won on the night. Justin Gaethje, congratulations, brother. It was an honor to share the cage with such a legend. Go get that undisputed title. Your career deserves it. Hopefully we can run it back for the undisputed, because I still know it's in my destiny to win that UFC gold. UFC, thank you for the opportunity. You all know I'll be back for that belt in the near future. Yeah. As a cookie cutter of a statement that you can get from a fighter that just ended up losing a fight. Oh, by the way, on a separate note, I just got, so like I said, I put up a bunch of my posters that I've had for a long time in my studio here, so it just really feels even more like a studio. But I got this bad boy back up. I want to know how many people have seen this poster and know about this poster. Let me pull it up on the screen here. Here we go. How many people remember this poster? The UFC comic book. I think this was the official poster, if I'm not mistaken. But it was amazing. We had Hendricks versus Lawler 2 on the card. Sick card. Pettis versus Melendez. But I loved the comic book style they had it. They even had the old school UFC logo up in the left here. But yeah, I managed to get that back up on my wall here. A little bit dated. Maybe a little bit of wear and tear on it as well. But I love this poster. So happy to finally get it back up. But yeah, this one was a banger of a card and one of the better UFC posters from back in the day. Other ones that I got, the first ever UFC event I went to, UFC 113 in Montreal. We had Shogun versus Machida 2. Went to that one, and it was very sweet to go there because Shogun was my favorite fighter, one of my favorite fighters, one of the guys that really got me into the sport as well. He ends up knocking out Lyoto Machida that night. That was a sick card as well. Johnny Hendricks against TJ Grant on the prelims. A lot of these names, I'd be surprised if a lot of you guys recognize it, but there were some decent names back then. Matt Mitrione against Kimbo. That was, I can't believe they had that fight in freaking Montreal of all places. Jeremy Stevens against Sam Stout was a fun fight. Josh Koscheck against Paul Daly. That was the fight that got Daly banned from the UFC after Josh Koscheck. If anybody remembers Koscheck, very loudmouth, brash, asshole kind of personality. He kept tripping at Daly. Koscheck, heavy, strong wrestler. Daly, more of a striker. Koscheck just rode him for 15 minutes, talked shit from bell to bell, and then once the fight was over, Koscheck got off him, Daly followed him and sucker punched him, and then got cut from the UFC and banned. And then obviously Shogun and Machida. I got UFC 164 poster up in the corner there, where I believe it was when Pettis beat Henderson for the title. I think he submitted him that night. That was a good one. Now what else do I got? Oh, I got UFC 167 poster up here. GSP versus Hendricks. This was GSP's first retirement fight, in a sense. I think he kind of just left the sport after this fight, and then eventually came back and fought Bisping. What else do I got? I think that's it. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 posters. Aldo McGregor, I already told you guys I have. And then I got a few regional posters up above my backdrop here. More so sentimental shit. Bankroll King, shout out. Appreciate you stopping by here. Robert said my first live event was Silva versus Forrest, Penn versus Kemflo in Philly. That was UFC 101, right? That was a damn good event. Yeah, again, that's when I really became a hardcore fan. I've been to an event in Philly. I road trip down from Toronto to watch Rashad Evans against Tito Ortiz. I believe it was supposed to be Rashad against Phil Davis first, but then Phil Davis fell out. Tito Ortiz stepped in. And then I think we even had Yoshihiro Akiyama against Vitor Belfort in the co-main event. That was fun. And then I think that was the card where we had the infamous Dennis Hallman and Brian Ebersol fight, where Dennis Hallman fought in the what was it? UFC? Was it UFC 134? No, 131. No, which one was it? Rashad Evans versus Tito Ortiz 2. UFC 133. Fuck, I should have known that. I feel like that was the card where Brian Ebersol... No, I don't want to go to AI mode. Yeah, Brian Ebersol against Dennis Hallman. Because Dennis Hallman came out in like Speedos. I don't even think he got it cleared. Because the UFC normally clears all this shit. But this is what this motherfucker fought in. He fought in a goddamn Speedo. Wells Fargo Center. Yeah, that was Philly. And then Dana ended up giving Brian Ebersol an extra bonus because he got Dennis Hallman out of there pretty quickly. I want to see if they comment on that here in the... no, they don't comment in it on the Wikipedia page. But yeah, Brian Ebersol finished Dennis Hallman in the first round. Yeah, here, they actually have it noted here. Brian Ebersol was awarded an honorary getting those horrifying shorts off TV as soon as possible bonus by Dana White by defeating Dennis Hallman in the first round. Oh, that was hilarious. Yeah, Vitor Belfort knocking out Akiyama was nasty. That was only in 2 minutes. Yeah, Gustafsson against Hamill on the prelims. Yeah, that was crazy. All right, let's get back to these last few questions here, and then I'm going to sign off. Grimy, appreciate you stopping by. I've been sub for a while, but never stopped in for a live. Hope all is well. What fight you looking forward to the most this weekend? Mine is Fiziev versus Rufy. Well, first off, appreciate you stopping by. Shout out to you for stopping by. Again, this is only like my third or fourth live of the year, so really getting into the swing of things here. Hope to see you more often than not in these lives. The fight that I am most looking forward to this weekend, as a die-hard fan, I'm really looking forward to Sebastian Salai versus Keiichiro Nakamura. Salai looks like a very well-rounded prospect. Nakamura, I've kind of equated him to a poor man's Japanese version of Shamil Musayev. Good takedown defense from everything I've seen thus far, good enough. And nasty striker, big power as well. Whereas Salai, good striker, good grappling, and is the toughest test for either guy in their career here. So really looking forward to that fight. Again, that's a diehard MMA nerd approach there. Not even getting into the main card as of yet, but Salai versus Nakamura should be a very, very fun fight. If you haven't checked out my full card breakdown, make sure you guys check it out specifically for that fight to see why I'm so excited for it. Other than that, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Fiziev versus Rufy has got to be the people's main event. That's a very fun striking battle. I think it's going to be a little bit more lopsided than the odds are indicating. But should still be a fun fight for as long as it takes place. Shinobi said, did you watch Strickland versus Duplessis in Toronto? I didn't go to the fight. If I remember correctly, first of all, tickets were just obscenely priced, right? I think it was like $500 for, or like $300 or $400 for like lower bowl seats. I was like, nah, I'm good. Not to mention around that same time, tickets went on sale for Drake and J. Cole in Buffalo. So I'm like, you know what? I would rather spend my money and get decent tickets for the Drake and J. Cole concert than go to a fight card headlined by freaking Sean Strickland and Dricus Duplessis. And if you guys remember, that wasn't a great card overall in terms of the name value on the card, right? There was, I think, Raquel Pennington and Mara Bueno Silva was the co-main event. And we saw how shitty that fight ended up playing out. So I'm kind of glad that I did end up skipping it. I've been to the majority of Toronto cards, but I definitely skipped out on the Strickland versus Duplessis fight. One, the card wasn't strong enough. Price just wasn't worth it. And then obviously for that Drake and J. Cole concert, I definitely wanted to go to that and spend the money there. All right. We have surpassed the 1 hour mark of this live stream for Tuesday. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Appreciate some of the new names that we've been seeing in here as well. Every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern to 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm live. Otherwise, we go live on Fridays for the Fight Day live chat from 1 p.m. Eastern to 2 p.m. Eastern. But I'll also be doing a Watch Party Buddies stream again for UFC 325 for the YouTube members. If you haven't already signed up and you're interested in that, it's only $2 a month. Keeps the chat nice and chill. Vibes are always high. Make sure you guys come on through for that if you're interested. Otherwise, make sure you guys check out the rest of the content that I got dropping for UFC this week. And then back to the live stream on Saturday from 1 p.m. Eastern to 2 p.m. Eastern. All right. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. I'll see you guys again throughout the week. Peace.